May she rest in peace. That list also includes at least 19 other individuals, one Hollywood producer worth a few $100 million, one royal prince, one high-profile individual in the music industry, one very prominent banker, one high-profile government official, one high-profile former politician, one owner of a car company in Italy, one rock star, one magician, at least 6 billionaires, including a billionaire from Canada.
20 explosive names, one straightforward inquiry, and 100,000 pages of FBI papers might reveal the worst institutional failure in the history of federal law enforcement in only 67 seconds. A Hollywood producer, a royal prince, a magician, 6 millionaires, 20 guys mentioned within FBI files the director of the FBI directly oversees. And one day before, the same director had faced Congress in the eye and declared there is no credible information pointing to anyone else.
Himself, there is no credible information. None. If there were, I would bring the case yesterday that he trafficked to other individuals.
The admission by FBI Director Kash Patel that he had never seen the victim testimonials languishing in his bureau's archives caught Congressman Thomas Massie off guard. It was unexpected for Patel that a fellow Republican would be the one to discredit him on national television. Every pause, every twist, and the precise moment Patel realized he was stuck in a paradox that stretched back through 3 presidential administrations were captured on camera. When Patel's self-assured no credible information argument collapsed before the House Judiciary Committee, what exactly did Massie provide about Epstein's client list? Here you will see the exact moment that promise became an impenetrable trap from which he was unable to free himself. This is not a review. Exactly as written, this occurred in a congressional hearing chamber.
Gentleman, yes, back.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request.
Gentleman's recognized.
So I've got 4 documents I'd like to introduce into the record. The first one is Jeffrey Epstein's 6th story played out for years in plain sight. And Acosta is quoted in here saying, I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone. The second document is entitled, What Epstein's Bodyguard Warned About His CIA Connections. The third document is from Fox Digital. It's titled, Epstein's Private Calendar Reveals Planned Meetings with Obama Admin Official CIA Chief. And the last document is Wall Street Journal article that highlights Ehud Barak's 36 meetings with Jeffrey Epstein. He was the former Prime Minister of Israel and head of military intelligence for Israel. It may have held that title when he met Epstein, and then, yes.
Without objection, the gentleman will hold for a second. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one UC request. This is Judge Engelmeyer's decision from August in U.S. versus Epstein stating the government's 100,000 pages of Epstein files dwarfs the 70-odd pages of Epstein grand jury materials.
Without objection, the gentleman from Kentucky is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, I watched some of your Senate hearing yesterday when Senator Kennedy asked you, you've seen most of the files, who, if anyone, did Epstein traffic these women to besides himself? You replied, according to the transcript, there is no credible information that he trafficked them to anyone else. You also said somewhere in the hearing and here today that the problem is that the case files are constrained by limited search warrants from 2006 to 2007 and that the non-prosecution agreement hamstrung future investigations. Those constraints only apply to the Southern District of Florida. They do not apply to the Southern District of New York, the location of the 2019 sex trafficking indictment, which produced many things, including a series of FD 302 documents. According to victims who cooperated with the FBI in that investigation, these documents in FBI possession, your possession, detail at least 20 men, including Mr. Jess Staley, CEO of Barclays Bank, who Jeffrey Epstein trafficked victims to, victims including minors, such as Virginia Roberts Giuffre.
Each of these 4 papers is terrible in its own right. So let's dissect what Congressman Thomas Massie recently added to the official record of Congress. Together, they totally undermined the tale Kash Patel presented the Senate only one day before. First, Massie presented the Acosta paper. Alexander Acosta, the U.S. attorney who cleared Jeffrey Epstein's controversial 2008 plea agreement in Florida, allegedly informed Trump transition officials that he was asked to back off the issue. The reason? He was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone. This wasn't some crazy idea. It came from the identical prosecutor who granted Epstein one of the most generous agreements in recent history, a deal that permitted him to spend only 13 months with work release while victims were silenced. That one comment begs the scariest issue of all. Was Epstein shielded because he was valuable to big intelligence interests? Second, Massie put out the paper revealing what Epstein's own bodyguard had warned about: his CIA links. The individual responsible for Epstein's personal protection was flagging intelligence links. This wasn't gossip from outsiders. It originated from within Epstein's close group. Third, Massie entered Epstein's secret calendar, which disclosed scheduled meetings with the CIA head and Obama administration officials. These weren't random social interactions. They were prearranged meetings that demonstrate Epstein retained access to some of the most prominent individuals in government, even after he was already a convicted sex offender. But the fourth paper may be the most explosive of them. Massie brought a Wall Street Journal study demonstrating that Ehud Barak, the former Prime Minister of Israel and former Chief of Israeli Military Intelligence, met with Jeffrey Epstein at least 36 times. Barak went aboard Epstein's private jet and visited his houses in New York and Florida many times, even after Epstein's 2008 conviction. A guy who had led one of the world's most advanced intelligence organizations was routinely seeing a known sex trafficker, and nobody in the hearing chamber protested when this was submitted into the record. Kash Patel sat there and heard every word. Just 24 hours before, he had firmly assured Senator John Kennedy and the whole Senate that there was no credible indication Epstein had trafficked victims to anybody else. He said if such proof existed, he would have presented charges yesterday.
I'm telling you, he killed himself. I'm not going to withhold information from the American public ever. But I'm also not going to rush to get it out there in a format in which they can't rely on it.
Yet, when presented with concrete papers detailing intelligence links, a former Israeli intelligence chief's frequent encounters, and a secret calendar tying Epstein to CIA officials, Patel gave practically little in response. He didn't object. He didn't push back with counter evidence. He merely let the papers join the record. That silence speaks louder than any planned speech. Either Patel was surprisingly unprepared for simple queries concerning files under his immediate authority, or he knew these facts would be impossible to refute. In any event, his credibility suffered a severe damage on live television. This is the moment the no credible information argument started to collapse. But Massie wasn't done. What occurred next made the breakdown much more clear.
We know these people exist in the FBI files, the files that you control. I don't know exactly who they are, but the FBI does. Have you launched any investigations into any of these people, and have you seen these 302 documents?
Sir, I have asked my FBI agents to review the entirety of the Epstein files and bring forth any credible information. And we're working with Congress not only to divulge that information and produce it to you, but any investigations that arise from any credible investigation will be brought. There have been no new materials brought to me launching a new indictment.
So is the loophole here, or is it your assertion that these victims aren't credible, that the 302s maybe didn't produce credible statements that rise to a probable cause?
It's not my assertion, sir. It's the assertion of two different United States attorneys' offices from three separate administrations who investigated those same materials in lifetime.
Are the 302 documents in the FBI's possession?
They reviewed all that, yes, sir.
And so have you reviewed those 302 documents where the victims name the people who victimized them?
If I personally know, but the FBI has.
So how can you sit here and in front of the Senate and say there are no names?
I said
I named one today.
I said we are not in the practice at the Department of Justice FBI of releasing victims' names. That is not what we do. We are also not in the habit of releasing incredible information. That's not what we do. But multiple authorities have looked at the entirety of what we have.
Okay, I got to move on here. Were you present when the AG had the White House event when she released the binders to the social media influencers?
I was, yes.
So if you're willing to meet with social media influencers who stood to benefit from the sensational and sad stories of these victims, will you meet with the victims as well?
The FBI will meet with anyone who has new information.
Will you personally meet with them?
The FBI and the professionals who are handling the cases will.
Were you instructed that it was important to release the documents to the Oversight Committee on the day of my introduction of the discharge petition to release these files?
I don't know what day that was, so no.
Well, they were released that day, and there were victims' names who weren't redacted because they were in such a rush, and the victims are not happy about that. Have you investigated any of the CIA connections? Have you seen the CIA file on Jeffrey Epstein? And if you wanted to see it, would they show it to you?
Well, I can speak for the FBI, and that's presuming there's a CIA case file. And I've reviewed everything that the interagency, not I, the FBI, that was provided to us.
Would you be willing to look at the CIA file on Jeffrey Epstein?
If there is such a file, and if it has not already been turned over to the FBI will look at any new investigative leads.
Have you made any progress on the pipe bomb investigation January 6th? And have you made any progress on the motive of the Las Vegas shooter?
As to the first, it's an ongoing investigation, and we have made progress. As to the second, sir, I'll have to get back to you.
Listen attentively to what just transpired. Massie didn't depend on supposition or secondhand information. He faced Patel with the concrete repercussions of his own prior testimony. One day after addressing the Senate, there was no credible proof Epstein trafficked victims to anyone else. Patel was forced to confront the truth that victim testimonies already existed within FBI files, statements that identify particular influential persons. Instead of addressing the topic, Patel withdrew into bureaucracy. He stated his agents were analyzing the files and that no fresh indictments had reached his desk. He alluded to former U.S. attorneys from several administrations who had apparently studied the identical papers. But that statement simply generated a more uncomfortable question. Why was the current FBI director using the judgments of former administrations as a cover when he now owns the exact files in question? Even more telling was Patel's admission that he had not personally studied the crucial victim accounts. He could claim the FBI had seen them, but he could not say he had. When challenged on how he could reliably assure the Senate there were no names, his explanation was procedural rather than substantive. He talked on agency policy on publishing victim identities and the danger of providing uncredible information. These are reasonable problems in theory. In reality, these seemed like simple strategies to evade responsibility for papers already in his control. The contrast became even sharper when Massie raised the White House event where files were released to social media influencers. Patel confirmed he was present. Yet, when asked if he would personally meet with the real victims whose lives were shattered, his response remained vague and institutional. The FBI will speak with anybody who had fresh information, he added. The difficulty is that the victims had previously submitted information years ago. Their assertions resided among the FD 302 records Patel had not personally seen. Then came the CIA question. Massie inquired specifically whether Patel had seen the CIA information on Jeffrey Epstein. The response was the most non-committal answer conceivable. If such a file existed and had not previously been shared, the FBI would look at any fresh leads. There was no confirmation, no denial, and no feeling of urgency. For a director who had been vociferous about openness on other matters, this cautious hedging struck out.